You know, I'm supposed to talk about economics, so I was looking at that bastion of economic knowledge today, USA Today, in my hotel room, and I saw that the UN has declared March 20th the International Day of Happiness. And so what this originated from was that the country of Bhutan has an index called the National Happiness Index that they use to make a holistic gauge of how their country is doing, not just GDP. So I just put that out there as we talk about dollars and cents and economics, which I am not an economist. I'm a social scientist communicator. There are many ways of looking at costs. I know what my reason here is. I am here to validate all the people on this panel that know a lot more than I do about Michigan agriculture, and probably a lot more about agriculture in general. I like to start my talks about animal agriculture with this slide from the cave painting at Lascaux. And my point here is that we humans have been on a very long journey, this continuum with the animal kingdom. And when we look at this painting, we have to ask, what were these ancients thinking? They were living in a world of hunt or be hunted, of predator and prey. There was a creaturely world all around them. And from this painting, we can see the cow and the goat and the horse and the domesticated animals, and even the remnants of our wild animals that we have today. Domestication came later. Domestication came as we began to farm. And when we think about this journey that we've been on, even with animals, imagine that the guinea fowl from which our modern chicken originated laid 17 eggs per year. The modern hen, industrial hen, in a CAFO will lay 330 eggs per year. So you can imagine what it was like for we humans that were concerned about civilization and survival, making these such careful decisions and locally adapting plants and animals for human needs and for survival. And when I say humans making these decisions, I'm not talking just about peasants and farmers. I am talking about the founding fathers, where not just Jefferson, but Washington, Adams, Ben Franklin, James Madison, they all considered themselves farmers and gardeners first, and they were obsessed with finding the best plants and rotations and animals, not just for them, but for the country. And we have that strong heritage of agriculture here. Now, if we fast forward to the the 1860s, we are shaping policy that is dealing with animals. And between 1850 and 1870, we extirpate one of the largest assemblages of grazing animals that ever lived on this planet, 70 million bison, as a way to get rid of the Indian tribes. And possibly one of the most tragic and disastrous policies that we ever made, because it facilitated the plowing of the prairie and the origins of what we have right now. So if we go forward again to post-World War II, we have a policy where we decide that, if you're going to be a farmer, you have to be an industrial farmer. And that means being very big. And another beginning that we had, that we were able to do, and we did this as a culture. We had antibiotics that helped us to keep animals in confinement. We had vitamin D that kept animals alive without sunshine in windowless barns so that we could raise them all year long. And we had these transportation systems that allowed us to move, feed, and animals around. We begin the urbanization of agriculture. The decreaturization, if such a word exists, taking the creatures off the land. In fact, taking the farmers off the land, and we did it with just every species as the decades wore on. We learned how to raise 2,500 hogs in a single building, where the air is continuously sucked out and put back in, where the hooved animals never touch the ground. Snouted animals never really get to explore the world with their snout, where 30,000 chickens grow from chick to broiler in 7 weeks' time. Cattle, we do it to dairy, we do it to just about every animal we can. And again, this is a feeding operation. And the real differentiation, the real launching off here in this idea is that the animals don't necessarily have to eat the diets they're accustomed to. We breed these industrial animals that grow really intensively fast, and they have they're very prolific, and they're basically little protein factories. The problem is that these operations get bigger and bigger. So CAFO is an EPA definition. It basically deals with how many animals are on a certain area with what kind of waste storage system, and where it's cited. And CAFO was a definition that came out of the Clean Water Act. It was introduced by Republican Bob Dole in the 1970s because it suddenly became alarming what pollution problems these factory farms were contributing to our waterways. In the case of poultry manure, I just put this up here because I like to just give this little fact that since around the 40s, we've been feeding poultry manure to cattle as a feed supplement because we found that they'll eat it if it's mixed in their feed, and it helps them gain weight. And it's cheap, and these big poultry operations have to get rid of it. What's not very super commonly known is that we do feed cattle parts to chickens. We also feed arsenic to chickens to clean their gut out. And it all goes back into this waste system that then is closed in the bovine feeding cycle. Waste is often stored in large, wet pit lagoons, and unfortunately, waste is being made all the time, not just when it's convenient for farmers to apply to their fields. And with such high concentrations of animals, waste becomes a real problem. Here you see the spraying of CAFO waste from a pig operation in North Carolina right near a creek drainage. Okay, and you can see that the back part of that field is already glistening. The water is already saturating. It has nowhere else to go now but straight into the creek. And here's another operation where you see you've got the houses and the open pit lagoon and the central pivot area here. So that is kind of the only thing that's missing from this picture is the fields where the feed has grown. And Mother Nature is out there, and inevitably we have rain. We have rain in across the wherever CAFOs really are located, and we get runoff into our waterways that we depend on for wells, drinking water, for the whole ecosystem that exists inside a farming area. And in the case of eastern North Carolina, we have CAFOs located on Hurricane Alley, where every 7 or 8 years we get a tropical storm which just overwhelms this state, which has been given over to hog and poultry production. And here you see not just the waste, but the animals themselves have been overwhelmed by water. And if you live in a community, if you are unfortunate enough to be in a community where CAFOs have intensified, and that is often their pattern, go into a very poor area, go into an area which is not very strictly regulated, the CAFO production problem becomes your problem. And you have pest infestations like this explosion of flies. And you've got what is often referred to as odor, which is just an atmosphere which is toxic, where you can't even go outside of your house on certain days, and you can become a prisoner in your home. You can become a prisoner in your home even as your property owners are plummeting, because you have suddenly found that your farming region, your rural area, this place where you might have lived, has become a waste colony. And I don't say this lightly. I say this as someone who has gone around the country and experienced these rural problems in North Carolina, in Kentucky, and Illinois, today in Michigan, in Washington, in Central California. Antibiotics, I think we're going to hear something about this on the panel. Let's just say one of the great tools of industrial ag, animal ag, has been antibiotics. How do you keep so many animals alive in such crammed, dirty conditions? And it's basically with small doses of antibiotics. And it's not necessarily, we're not overdosing animals, we're underdosing animals. And as we put out small doses of antibiotics regularly, we select for bacteria that are resistant to those antibiotics. And we use, for the most part, the same antibiotics that we use in human medicine. So we're essentially selecting for bugs that our human medicines can't defend us against, like MRSA. We've got ethical conundrums. This is the gestation crate. The gestation crate is used to confine a sow. And we're going to hear from a sow farmer in a bit. Let's just say that the sow, for its 4.5-month pregnancy, does not move around. It is confined, as Temple Grandin would say. It's like being stuck in the middle seat in a jumbo jet, but you can never get out. The sows have their piglets. They're also in a confined crate at that point as well, and then they're put back in and re-inseminated, and this is pretty much how we create piglets. The interesting thing is that there's broad consensus in the United States that the average citizen does not want food produced with animal cruelty. They want to have some humane standards, and I think the percentages are high. I come from California. We passed a proposition, an animal welfare proposition, that got 63% of the vote. It was considered a landslide. Now retailers are beginning to get into this issue, and you have last year McDonald's, Burger King, Wendy's, Safeway, Kroger's, Costco, you name it, almost everyone but Walmart has suddenly made a pledge that they would like to phase out the purchase of pork that has originated, where the animals have originated in a gestation crate system. The real interesting part of that movement, that new change, is how this is going to actually happen. Who's going to pay for it? How are we going to get these highly aggressive genetics out of these industrial pigs that we've bred? Who is going to teach the new management skills that we need in order to raise hogs in a different way? We should very much applaud that we're moving in a direction, and warily look as progress takes place. Again, we're talking about, turning animals really just into machines. They're more machines than creaturely. We're producing animals at an extremely fast pace, but at the same time as we've been making our farms bigger, it means that we have less people on the land. We have less farmers. We have less and less processing facilities. So farmers that do still raise animals have to go farther and farther away to these processing facilities that get bigger and bigger. By bigger and bigger, we're talking in the Tar Heel plant in North Carolina, processes 36,000 hogs per day. And here is a modern poultry operation in China. I think the real alarm that we should have, and certainly the United Nations sounded that alarm when they produced a report called Livestock's Long Shadow in 2006, is that increasingly the rest of the world wants to eat like us. And they're adopting our CAFO systems and our big meat-intensive diets. So I hope what we can do today is really talk a little bit about, is our food really cheap, if we're talking about economics? Do we pay the real price of our food, and especially animal products, at the checkout counter? But with global population soaring toward 7, 8, 9 billion, how do we raise our food without intensification? What are alternatives out there? What share of our taxpayer dollars go to support the CAFO system? What's the cost of monopoly of very, very few massive firms really controlling almost every sector of this industry? And then what are the costs, what are the ethical costs that we bear by being complicit in this system? And I say that because about 95% of our food, of our animal products, are produced in these feed, concentration, waste, pollution-like systems, cycles. So if we don't grow our own, and if we don't buy from somebody that we're sure is doing it well, we're complicit just by eating. So we have a role in this, and that's what's so great about the Less is More campaign. I think people always wanted me to talk about the Farm Bill. It's already 7:25, and I don't want to put anybody to sleep. Let's suffice it to say, because we're going to hear a little bit more about it, that the Farm Bill started in the 30s. It started in the Great Depression, and it was an acknowledgement from the government, this genie that got let out of the bottle, that said, the government has a role in the food system. There are things that happen in the food system that the market does not count for, especially conservation, making sure the soil does not blow away, but also making sure that there's room on the farm for animals, and making sure that it's not the only goal of the farmer isn't just overproducing, because when farmers overproduce, the price goes down. Right, the more they produce, the more the price drops, and they can never really get ahead. So the Farm Bill is really there to make sure farmers have credit, and they have research, and they have tools to do their job. They have incentives to take care of the land so they can pass to the next generation without the soil blowing away, and also to make sure that Americans are fed. The CAFO industry is a huge, huge beneficiary of Farm Bill dollars. First in feed, the commodity payments and the crop insurance payments and a whole network of payments that encourage growers of corn, cotton, because cotton seed's a feed, soybeans, to grow as much as they can. The more they grow, the better the price for the animal feeding operations that are buying those crops. And then also the EQIP program that was referred to earlier. And the EQIP program is in the conservation part of the Farm Bill. It started in 1996 as a program to help small landowners that raised animals or that were adjacent environmentally sensitive areas, especially waterways that would go into a water supply, for example. But in 2002, and CAFOs were not allowed in that early 1996 pilot program. It was specifically for small farmers, for small operators. In 2002, that changed. The industry was able to insert that CAFOs were eligible for conservation dollars to deal with their waste management issues. So these industrial operations basically were getting a free ride, and oftentimes quite considerable amounts of money to build lagoons, to build drainages, to set up spray operations, to basically deal with this increasing waste problem that's overwhelming communities. Here's just one person's, Doug Gurry and Sherman from the Union of Concerned Scientists came up with this analysis a few years ago that paying the CAFO industry costs 1.6 to apply manure to fields, 1.6 billion per year. That property values in 2008, when the report came out, had decreased $26 billion in CAFO areas. So if you lived within a 2.5 mile radius of a CAFO, your property value goes down. Health costs from the overuse of antibiotics, $1.5 billion per year. Grain subsidies, $4 billion per year. EQIP subsidies, 100 to 125 billion. So you can see that we taxpayers actually are very engaged in this whole industry. And if you're a community, as I said, that is under siege, you have no alternative but to try to fight back, especially when the regulatory agencies aren't supporting you. This is a site I flew to Illinois in a couple years ago for this. It's in Joe Davies County, and a California dairy had gone into this rural farming village, and they wanted to put a California-like dairy in the middle of this very fragile ecosystem, this limestone ecosystem, and the Illinois Department of EPA allowed them, even unpermitted, to start to build their operation. So you can imagine you're a small farmer, in comes this huge corporation, and the first thing they do is start clearing the land and digging pits. They dug a series of pits 40 acres in size and 20 feet deep. Okay, and you have to be seriously concerned if this is your land, this was your grandfather and your great-grandfather's land, and you want to continue that and your kids want to stay there, what this place is going to be like when they put 5,000 animals on this industrial park. Luckily, they turned themselves into citizen scientists, like engaged citizens do in counties around the country, and they caught them discharging into the Applegate River. And the permit was revoked, and the happy story is that this operation decided that, this is a really CAFO unfriendly community. I think we better pack up and move. The challenge is they're going to move somewhere else. And the same citizen fight has to start again. There are things that we can do. The city of Los Angeles declared a meatless Monday for its school district. City of Los Angeles, if I'm not mistaken, and sometimes my numbers get a little convoluted, but I think they do 600,000 meals per day. The whole city of Los Angeles. Okay, could it be per week? Anyway, the city of Los Angeles School District, let me just say that is a large number of school lunches, and from 1 day per week, right? That's a significant decrease in their animal products. And if we do that in our lives, that's a 15% cut in animal products that we can contribute toward scaling down the diet that we've built up from the CAFO industry. There's another initiative that I'm enamored with. It's Pasture-Based Friday. And the Oregon Friends of Family Farmers have just initiated it. So imagine, of course, getting the alternative often costs a lot. People can't do it. But if you did it every Friday and you got organic eggs or, organic cheese or some beautiful pasture-raised product, you can do that once a week. And again, that's adding 15% of the right kinds of animal products that you might want to put in your food system. I want to end here with a short discussion of a trip that I took to Germany this winter. The man on your right is named Karl Ludwig Schweisfurth. Schweisfurth is 84 years old. He lives in Upper Bavaria. outside of Munich. And Schweithwirth is a butcher. His father was a butcher, and they were in the meat business. As a young man, he was sent to Chicago to work for Oscar Mayer. And he learned the meat processing, the modern American meat processing business. And he built his family's company, Herta, into the largest meat processing company in Europe. So this is a big, big operation. And a very successful man, whose sons began to wear on him. Dad, you know, this isn't the business for us. This isn't the business that you think it is. And he told me with very sad eyes that one day he went into a modern pig facility in Germany and he decided, that's it. Went home, told his wife, we're selling the business and we're starting over. And this was in 1984. And they bought a beautiful farm outside of Bavaria, and they started to brew beer, grow grain, make bread. They got a restaurant. And Carl did what he really wanted to do, which was raise animals. Raise animals in very small scale systems that he could feel really good about. And this is an indoor barn with access to the outdoors, where the animals are raised in their family units, and then they can be moved out on pastures. But he also has animals out on pastures, chickens. He has symbiotic chicken duck pastures, and smaller paddocks where you can see the pigs are happily rooting around even in the wintertime. And then he got to do what he really wanted to do, which was build a modern meat processing facility that he felt very good about. And when you walked with him through his operation, he couldn't have been prouder about what this meant to the community, the jobs that were provided. And it was all really about quality. It was all about, hey, less but more, doing it right and feeling good about it. And he took us to these curing caves where they had these amazing hams and sausages, and then to the restaurant, and the whole circle was closed. And you may ask, you may say, well, hey, you know, yeah, he was one of the richest guys in Europe, so of course he could do that. But when you talk to him and when you pin him down, he will tell you, this is not a fad of some wealthy, eccentric person, but this is the future of where we have to go if food is going to be sustainable, because I've done it both ways. Aldo Leopold said that, you know, if it looks wrong, then it probably is wrong. So here's a photo of an operation in Wisconsin, not too far from here. And it's actually two sides of the same hill. One is a pasture-based operation run by Art Ticky, and the other is a grain operation that is still benefiting from some of the conservation tillage programs that came out of the Farm Bill. So you can see they've got their strips, their erosion strips. But you have to ask yourself, which farm really fits the land? And which farm really truly accommodates the animals that are there on it? And this is a medium-sized, highly successful operation with no outputs. Okay, there are really truly only inputs in this system. Leopold said, I leave you with a few words. He talked about biotic farming, where native flora and fauna lose acreage without losing existence. Okay, so that means if we go back to that picture of Lascaux, the creatures have not gone away. The creatures are still there, and they're very much alive on our farms. Prince Charles recently called sustainable agriculture, he defined it as agriculture that does not exceed the carrying capacity of the local ecosystem, and it recognizes the soil as the planet's most vital resource. I look forward to the discussion. Thanks a lot, let's have it. That's all I have to say.